morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio. So today, I figured it was time to look at the new way to play Malamar. Malamar's one of those Pokemon that we see seeing a huge amount of play in the Pokemon trading card game. It really does see a lot of play. It accelerates 1 psychic energy per Malamar per turn to one of your bench Pokemon. It accelerates psychic energy. It is frankly wonderful. And there are a whole bunch of Malamar decks out there. Some people play it with Ultra Necrozma. Some people play it as a non-GX deck with Giratina. And some people who have my undying respect, love, and admiration play it with Latios and Latias Tag Team GX. And they're not the only ways you can play it, incidentally. It sees quite a lot of play with Gengar and Mimikyu, although that tends to be a one-off tech in other builds of it. Now, I've had a cool list over in Japan that went and won a tournament, and I'll be honest with you, I cannot tell you for absolute certainty this is definitely going to be the only way to play Malamar going forward, but I am telling you that this does seem to have a good mix of cards, and especially attacking Pokemon, that at least looks to me to be the best way to play it nowadays. Now, I've already told you about Malamar, so let's move on and have a look at the attackers. And there are multiple different attackers. I think nominally here, our main attacker is Garchomp and Giratina. Now, this is going to be coming out in Unified Minds, and I think this is now the best attacker in Malamar decks. The main attack here for 1 Psychic, 1 Fighting, 1 Colorless Energy does 160 damage, but if there's any damage counters already on the defending Pokemon, you do 240. Cool. 240 for free energy beats what Ultra Necrozma can do. And it beats what Latios and Latias can do. Although, admittedly, they can do 240, but it's for an extra energy and they have to discard it all. Now, there are other attacks here, but that really is the one on which we are focusing. It's really quite nice. Lots of damage. Now, you do have to get damage on the defending Pokemon in order to be able to use it, and there are basically 2 ways in which we can do that. Firstly, we've got Giratina. The one from Lost Thunder, it's got the ability, when it's in your discard pile, you can put it from the discard pile onto the bench, drop 1 damage counter onto each of 2 benched Pokemon. Basically, it's just really good at dropping damage down so that you can then take those Pokemon out using Garchomp and Giratina. That's pretty cool. But we've got the new Blacephalon, and I expect the new Blacephalon to see play in every Malamar deck and in basically every Ultra Beast deck as well. I mean, look, we already see the Psychic-type Nihilego being played in a whole bunch of decks, so the Psychic-type Blacephalon should also see play. For 2 energy, you get to drop 4 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way that you like. Now, this is actually really good, because any Pokemon with damage on, you're then hitting 240 with Garchomp and Giratina. So that's pretty sweet. But you could say drop 3 damage counters onto a Reshiram and Charizard, so that then when you hit them for 240, you put them up to 270 and they get KO'd. That's pretty sweet. So that's something you'll want to consider doing. So between your Giratina and your Blacephalon, that you're going to work. Now, Blacephalon's attack actually gets better, because if you've got, or your opponent's got exactly 3 prizes remaining, you drop 12 damage counters, which is a phenomenal attack. But the great thing is, in this deck, you're not waiting till you've got an opponent with 3 prizes remaining, because the first attack is actually good, or the only attack, even if your opponent's got a different amount of prizes remaining. Compare that to something like Nihilego, where the first attack is unusable unless your opponent's only got 2 prizes remaining. So they're pretty gosh darn good. But there are more attackers in here. It's not just a Garchomp and Giratina deck. We have 1 copy of Ultra Necrozma. Now, Ultra Necrozma is your I can one-hit KO anything Pokemon. Ultra Necrozma, for a minimum 1 metal, 1 psychic energy, does 20 damage, you discard all basic psychic energy attached and do 80 more for each one discarded. So if you get 3 psychic on, you discard them all, do 260. But 4 psychic on, you discard them all and do 340. Well, I say you don't need to do that much. If you find yourself against a Magikarp and Wailord with a buff padding, that will actually still yet survive, because it will have 250 HP. But I think that is, shall we say, not something you're going to see terribly often. And then we've got one Mewtwo and Mew Tag Team GX. Mewtwo and Mew can copy the attacks of any of your EX or GX Pokemon, although we're in Standard here, so just GXs, either on the bench or in the discard pile. So Mewtwo and Mew could be an Ultra Necrozma, it can be a Garchomp and Giratina. You could also copy Tapu Lele's attack if you want. Yeah? Speaking of which, we've got one Tapu Lele here. Really, it's just a bit of consistency, lets you grab that supporter. And 2 copies of Jirachi here, because, well, again, consistency. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck when it's in the active, find a trainer card, put it into your hand, shuffle your deck. Cool. And then Jirachi goes to sleep, but that doesn't really matter because you've got Escape Board, which can be used to free retreat, and you're rolling. And that's your Pokemon line. There is quite a bit going on here. Now, in terms of energy, we do have to play some metal energy here to use Ultra Necrozma. Other than that, you're going Psychic. There is an argument that you could drop the Ultra Necrozma and just go Psychic energy, but your Garchomp and Giratina, and therefore your Mewtwo and Mew, has a damage cap. Ultra Necrozma doesn't. Okay, to be fair, Ultra Necrozma's damage cap is 80 times all of the Psychic energy in your deck, but that's not terribly realistic. We do also see a couple of Fighting energy here. We have to have the Fighting energy, because remember, Fighting energy is needed for Garchomp and Giratina's attack. Again, you could drop the Fighting energy, but you'd have to drop the Garchomp and Giratina. It is kind of awkward, but when you're accelerating Psychic energy with Malamar, it's alright. Now, as we look at the trainers, we should start with Viridian Forest. Viridian Forest is why you can get away here, playing your Fighting energy and your Metal energy and your Psychic energy, because Viridian Forest lets you discard a card from your hand and search for a basic energy. It is the only way you can be consistent with the multiple types of energy. Also, you get to discard a card from your hand, and that could be a Psychic energy to accelerate using Malamar. We also see here there's a lot of stuff we would expect to see in most decks. We've got Ultra Ball and Nest Ball to search out Pokemon, 3 of each, because we also have Mysterious Treasure, which, well, it's like Ultra Ball, except you discard 1 card from your hand rather than 2, and you can search only for Psychic or Dragon Pokemon, which in this deck is everything except Jirachi. Literally everything except Jirachi. That's pretty gosh darn good here. Speaking of which, Garchomp and Giratina is a Dragon Pokemon. So just a quick note here that if you use Mewtwo and Mew to copy it, you're actually losing your Fairy weakness, so Mewtwo and Mew can cover the weakness quite nicely here. Also, Ultra Necrozma is weak to Fairy, so if you find yourself against a Fairy deck, Mewtwo and Mew will be invaluable. In terms of our draw here, we've generally got a mixture of Cynthia and Lily, the 2 best draw cards in the game, and also Erica's Hospitality. Draw 1 card for each Pokemon your opponent's got. Cool. And the great news here is that although you've got to have 4 other cards in hand or fewer, this is a kind of deck where you're playing down pretty much everything when you draw it, so Erica's works quite nicely. We've got 3 copies of Guzma to switch and to drag a Pokemon into the active, and a couple copies of Ace Roller because your Pokemon give up free prizes. Anytime you can heal, that is a very good thing. We've then got 2 copies of a skateboard, which we really need for Jirachi, 2 copies of Choice Band to do a little bit of extra damage, 3 copies of Escape Rope. It's good for switching, also forces your opponent to switch. Some people prefer Escape Rope, some people prefer Switch. And then we've got 1 copy of Reset Stamp, which we see in basically every deck ever at the moment. Forces your opponent to shuffle their hand into their deck, draw a number of cards equal to their remaining prizes. It really is a one-of in basically every deck in Japan at the moment, and I don't see any reason why it wouldn't continue to be. If you go behind on prizes, this is redonk. Now, if we have a quick look at the deck list here, one cool thing to note, the player has gone max rarity here. We've got pre-release Jirachi, secret rares, rainbow rares, full art supporters. He's gone secret rare alternate art on the tag team GXs. It really is just proper. This is not a cheap deck. Then again, it's a good player who's running around and winning tournaments, so they're probably fairly confident that the investment is going to be worth it. Plus, cards tend to be a little cheaper in Japan. Well, with some exceptions. Anyway, that's the deck, ladies and gentlemen. That's how I think Malamar probably should be played now. But I'd like to know what you think about it. So please do let me know in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WasiPlays, where we talk about games that don't even have Pokemon in. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.